So how can the land that we define as the Holy Land, the place of the Bible, how come it doesn't fit the Bible, or the Bible doesn't fit the land? And so we have to ask, in my opinion, can we say a painful question? We all, myself and all of us, have grown up with these Bible maps. We've grown up with the narrative that we've been given. We've grown up with that being Jerusalem and that being all these places. So all these assumptions, I mean, we're talking pretty much the faith that everybody believes in being grounded in this place is sort of coming frayed, if you want to call it that, or really coming apart at the seams. Because the more that they do the geology and the geography and hydrology and language issues and DNA and especially archaeology, what do they find? Issues, issues and issues and issues and issues upon issues. And the problem is, I want to put my hand here and say, okay, here's the issue for this video. And maybe this can help you to understand. I'm sure some of you already understand about cognitive dissonance, but for cognitive dissonance, it means you have been taught all your life this, and this is the truth that you hold, that the Bible, everything in the Bible happened in what we call the Holy Land today. That is what we believe. Now, on the other hand, we have all the modern evidence in the last 30, but really 100, but especially in the last 30, 40 years that show what? No, huge problem that being Jerusalem, it doesn't fit. Jericho doesn't fit at all. No, nothing in the Sinai to show anybody came through that land. So you start looking, or the ruins of Bethlehem weren't at the right time, or the Capernaum or Nazareth, the places that we've been called and told these names. We think those names go back to the Bible times, but they don't. And so we hold these two things in our hands, and that is so hard. That's cognitive dissonance. Both, if this is the Bible and this is the land, and it really happened there, then why is this not matching up? And so when we see this conflict, people are losing their faith. A lot of people are losing their faith. A lot of people are saying there really never was a Jesus, there never was this, or there never was a King David, there never was a Moses. Yeah, there might be some nice things in the Bible, some nice sayings, but it's not really any more useful to us than a Sumerian text or any other text in the world. And so doubt creeps in, cognitive dissonance, because if you have to choose, what do most of us do? We don't choose. Ostrich, one of the animals from the Bible, think of it. And where do we find ostriches, right? In a certain land, certainly not in the Levant. And we go, okay, what does the ostrich do? Into the sand. So that's what most of us tend to do. Most Bible believers tend to just go, yeah, I don't want to know about that. Just give me the stuff that, any proof that shows the Bible did happen there. If they find one coin that says David on it, then great. All I know, I don't need to know anything else. I have that one coin. But if there's 1,000 other coins that say something else, no, I can't look at that. That's like, no, don't tell me. And so that's putting your head in the sand. But I think if we're going to be honest, and if the Father in heaven is real, which I 100% certain he is, and also that the Bible is accurate, which I'm 100% certain it is, of course, few flaws, but basically very easy to believe that those happened. So for me, once I started looking at the animals of the Bible, which I'll get into in a minute, I started to go, there is a problem. And rather than burying my head in the sand, I'd look deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into these things. And so that's what I want to present to you, so you can at least consider these things, not to destroy faith, because I believe, and the reason I'm doing these and my other videos is that the way the world is going now is destroying faith. When you look up and do all this archaeology and it shows the Bible to not be accurate at all to what's in the ground, and you still believe in the Bible, then you start to have doubts. And doubts, of course, are destructive. And the more doubts, the more destructive. And to where people I know personally that just throw out God, throw out everything because this isn't, well, then just chuck it all away. But instead of going, I wonder if Rome took the pin out of one place, like in a map we can do on our phone. They took the pin from here and put it over there in the Levant. So where was the original pin? Is it possible that the pin is wrong and not the Bible? This issue is cognitive dissonance. the hardest thing you'll go through in your life, I believe. And like I said, for most people, it's just, I don't want to know. It's the same when they were doing the thing a few years ago. There was only 5, 10, 15% of people that were going, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not sure I want to go. Then there's others that were on the fence. And then there's another huge group that were just like, no matter what, I'll take it and I'll take 100 of them. Just give it to me. And because it's not being able to deal with cognitive dissonance. For that one, it was about medical issues. But this one is about our faith in the Bible, the book itself. Is it accurate or is it a fraud? Because that's what is weighed in the balance. And yes, we can just bury our heads, but in the end, that doesn't work. It only puts the problem off. I'll show a few pictures here of what the Levant or Palestine looked like, say, 100 years ago. Forget the irrigation of today, what it looked like 100 years ago. It is too small, too dry, too narrow, too compressed with all the 20 or 30 nations around it, Ammon, Moab, and all those people. Too limited in rivers. There's really just one small one. Too limited in valleys. Too limited in pastures. Too limited in biodiversity. And it cannot, you can look this up yourself, it could not in those days support millions of people that were supposed to have come out of Egypt. Cannot support vast herds, multiple nations, like I said. Just think of how many nations are mentioned in the Bible living around Jerusalem and that area. The continuous wars. We'll get into Egypt because one of the things you'll see with the wars is they weren't with Egypt. Okay? Large rivers, large lakes, large mountains. I've done a video on the Sea of Galilee and how large it would have had to be for the fishermen to be fearing for their lives. Large mountains, like I said, I've done a video on Jerusalem and its mountains. Large armies, 1.5 million for David, and yet we don't see them fighting Egypt. So we'll look at that in a second. So the Bible describes nations surrounding Israel on every side, armies marching for days with David and the armies, rivers large enough to cross that they had to have miracles to stop the water. They couldn't just wade through. Lakes with mountainous waves, mountains that were revered and worshipped, not just little hills, but mountains. Herds so large that they defined tribal wealth, gold everywhere, talked about gold all the time, especially in Solomon's time, migrations of hundreds of thousands of peoples, and wars overlapping generation after generation after generation, wars that are not recorded in the Egyptian records. Jerusalem, that was supposed to be the center of David's kingdom and then Solomon's, it was the one we have today. It wasn't just small, it was tiny. A village, a hamlet. We're talking 700 people. That's not a big place. It was basically a hilltop outpost. And that's what they're finding in archaeology today about Jerusalem, ancient Jerusalem. So it wasn't a capital of kings. It didn't have any structure of a center place, a king, with palaces or rule or reign or anything of any rich or value. And then we, as I said, mentioned Jericho with the walls that were never there to come down when Joshua went through. Not broken walls, just no walls, not just damaged at the time, just no walls in Jericho. So if Joshua was walking around Jericho, there were no walls. So then why were they walking around Jericho? It's like, yeah, I know, but we don't want to see these things, ostrich, head in the sand. So then if this is true, even if just the Jericho issue is true, but the Jerusalem one to me is, and so many others, once you start looking at them, then you have to say, that feeling starts to well up, because the whole map that we've been given and taught since we were little children, that whole map out the door, it is useless as a Bible map. And then that brings up a whole other matter, because before we can try to go and discover what could be the place where the Holy Land really was, or if you want to call it that, or the land of David, where it really was, we have to be willing to start to see the cracks in the armor or the chinks in the armor of what we actually believe now. Because we can't just move from, this isn't Jerusalem, so let's go find the other one. Most people can't do that. Most of us have to go through pulling one eye of the ostrich out of the sand and looking around and going, okay, maybe maybe I can look at that, maybe I can look at this, and over time start to feel comfortable within yourself. And that's just fine. That's how it takes. It takes time. Because the Savior said, knock and it should be opened. Didn't mean it'll be opened that second. Seek and you should find. Seek means over a period of time. So this process has taken me 3-4 years to get through at least. And so it takes time. We can't just do it in a day for most people, because opening our eyes is one thing. And then that means more opening our eyes until finally we can start to see it and then start to go, okay, I've accepted that. Now let's go and look. Let's go and seek. I know for us, maybe this is a help to you before I get into the animals and some of the other things. Think of Egypt. I'll put it on a map here next to the Levant. Look at the distance between the two places, 150 to 200 miles. They were we're talking neighbor states. And at the time, Moses actually left the land and went the 40 years in the wilderness. If he came back and lived in Levant, there were garrisons. That was the trade route north for Egypt into, what's Middle East and Asia today. And that was a trade route. And they had garrisons along there, living there. So if Moses came back and lived with his people there, they were living as neighbors. And they did see Egypt again, whereas he was told he would not see the Egyptians anymore. And yet now they're going to be back living with them. So Egypt in that day was a superpower. It wasn't just one little nation. It was the superpower of the world at that time, as we see with the pharaohs, and I've done videos on that. But the issue is the records of Egypt. Yes, they talk about a Canaan, but it doesn't say where that Canaan is. Yes, there is a war. One of the kings is mentioned that's from Israel. One war. We're talking 1,000, 1,200 years of living side by side. And there's pretty much no mention at all of trade, of nothing. So the Egypt question it looms huge once you start to look at it, especially since Egypt kept great records about every little detail. And yet their neighbor that lived right there, 200 miles away, the closest nation that would have been to them, and you hear, crickets, chirp, chirp, chirp. You hear nothing. There's nothing in the record really about them. So Moses said, you'll see the Egyptians no more. And in the Bible, what do we have? Yes, you hear of some type alliances once in a while with Egypt, and that's it. There is no trade. There's no wars. There's no diplomacy. There's no nothing, no border conflicts, no armies working. There's just nothing. No records, no inscriptions, no nothing. It's just silence. And that silence is deafening once you really start to look at it. And because of the Egypt issue and the archaeology now, most scholars, not ones that are just working for Bible-based things, but just the general scholarship and archaeology of the day, our day, they say what? The Bible has to be a myth or huge exaggeration. Because why? It's not accurate to the land. What they find and then find in the Egyptian records, it doesn't work with what's written in the Bible. They conflict. So the scholars and the archaeologists, the ones that we, trust, what do? They throw out the Bible, of course, and keep the land. Because to throw out the land, what would that mean? It would mean the center of 3 world religions being, sorry guys, pack up, go home, because this isn't the place. You're in the wrong place. Well, that wouldn't go over too well. So the Bible has to be the myth, not the land. I want to go over Jerusalem one more time, because if you look into this, you will see it. It was not a capital city. It was tiny, as I said, 11 to 12 acres, 500 to 700 people, no palace, no temple, no fortifications, no inscriptions, no administrative complex, no evidence of David or Solomon, no evidence of 700 wives and 300 concubines, no evidence of this huge army, no evidence. Contrast that, here's our cognitive dissonance. That's what they have found. What does it say in the Bible? Surrounded by mountains, sitting on a mountain, not a hill, on a mountain, a city of gold, silver so common that it was hardly of any value, a palace city, a temple city, a capital of empire. a center of worship, a center of administration, a center of trade, and a center of diplomacy. We read of Solomon receiving ivory from here and apes and peacocks and all kinds of stuff going on. And yet, what do we have in Jerusalem of our day? A tiny, dry village of no consequence, a teeny place with nothing there to show anything that should be there if it was the center of a kingdom. The Jerusalem of the Bible is not the Jerusalem of Levant. Hold those two things, look it up, and that might help you to see. They don't work. What they found in the ground and what's in the Bible, they do not match, not even slightly. But if the Bible is true, then Jerusalem, the real Jerusalem, cannot be where they say it is today. And probably, in my opinion, not even in the Levant, somewhere else. This is a fatal, fatal contradiction, not just a small, but fatal. Because if David's Jerusalem is wrong, then Solomon's Jerusalem is wrong. Then the temple is wrong. Then the entire monarchy is wrong. And then the entire map is wrong. Doesn't mean the map of the Levant is wrong where it is now. Those are the names that have been given to those places. But the map, if we could get a map from 2,500, 3,000 years ago of the real place where David was, it would look completely different than the map we have in our Bibles. And the scholars know this, which is why they say the mythical thing. They say David and Solomon were myths, or the Bible is exaggerated, or the stories were invented later, as I already mentioned. But what if the stories are true, holding that? What if the stories are actually true and the location is wrong? That's really what I hope you get out of this. I'm not going to specify what location I have in my mind, certain places, others have others. But the issue first, like I said, is can we even see that the location itself is wrong? And if we can start there, we're already halfway to finding out the real place anyway. I want to hit on Jericho quickly again because it's the second key thing I wanted you to help you to understand. The Bible describes Jericho, you can go read it, a fortified city. They had to have baskets lowered down off the walls when the spies went in. Massive walls, a 7-day march around, they're walking around it every day for 7 days with trumpets. The walls collapse. The conquest of the peoples. Rahab, who helps them and joins with Israel later with the tribes. The fire in the city, the destruction. But what do the archaeologists find in today? No walls, no large fortified city, no destruction layer matching Joshua, no evidence of a 7-day marchable perimeter that there was even room to go around, no population large enough to match the biblical account. Not broken walls, not damaged walls, no walls, none whatsoever. So again, which is true? What the archaeologists find in the ground in the place we call Jericho today, and keeping the Bible in Levant, the Holy Land we call today, or it's in the wrong place. And the Bible account is very true, accurate. We just haven't found the actual city they walked around. Those two things, they can't both be true, which is why there's this conflict or cognitive dissonance. Because as a viewer, and all of us, we have to decide, do we believe the account of Joshua in the Bible? Do we believe that account and believe it to be trustworthy? Or do we not? It comes down to that. Because if we hold it to be where Jericho is today, then we have to say it was a myth. It never happened. It was just made up and nice story and move on. Or if we say it really did happen and I trust the Bible account, then where was the real Jericho? Because this place, it doesn't fit at all. So give it up, move on, accept the reality that that was not Jericho. We can call it Jericho till the cows come home. Same as we can call Lake Victoria when 200, 300 years ago, it wasn't Lake Victoria. We can change names. We can call that place Jericho or that place Mount Sinai. But that doesn't make it so. That just is what a name that's been put on way after the time of Jesus. But if Jericho is wrong and Jerusalem is wrong, then the Levant, the whole Levant map can't support the biblical narrative or the world of the Bible. And as I said, what do we choose? Do we choose to let our faith fall in order to preserve that land? Am I going to give up my faith in God, my faith in the Bible, my trust that it's an actual account of an actual people? Because for me to believe and keep this land with this Jerusalem and this Jericho and Bethlehem, and if I'm going to keep that land, then unless I'm just doing the ostrich in the ground, I don't want to know. But if I want to use my head and want to think about it, either my faith has to go in the Bible or my faith has to go in that land. And for me, it's easy now. It's just like the land gone. Don't even think about it anymore. It's not there. It's easy because once you start to see the evidence starts to add up. And as long as we can take our emotion, our ego out of it, take our ego out of the equation and actually look at the actual facts on the ground, compare it to the Bible, we can see very easily. The more you see, the more you'll realize it doesn't match at all. Because in my opinion, for my channel, Fleeing Babylon, it's about using logic. If you want to see Babylon, if you want to see Jerusalem too, the real one, but if you want to see Babylon, what they do to us, and the lies we're told, and the things that are not true in history, then we have to be able to take our blinders off and become part of the 5 or 2 or 3 or 10%, the remnant that can actually start to see. Because if we don't do that, we will never flee Babylon, in my opinion, ever. Not a chance. Because we will love Babylon. If Babylon and Rome have given us this place and it's not right and it's not true, if we go, that doesn't matter, I'm going to trust in that because that's the way I want to go. Well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong. Everybody can believe what they want. But if you really want to open your eyes and see, then we can't be like the people in Nazareth or the Pharisees. We have to be willing, like Peter, John, James, to open our eyes and go, okay, I can see. I can start, even though it hurts, even though it's giving up everything, as Jesus asked the rich young man, give it all up and come follow me. Meaning give up everything you think that you know, everything, and come start as a little child and start again. And that is so very, very hard for us to do. But if we insist that Jericho and Jerusalem of today are the places in the Bible, even when archaeologists shows that it is not the place, there's no match between the Bible and what's in the ground, then we are choosing tradition over truth. And what did Jesus say about the tradition of the fathers to the Pharisees, right? He came to break the tradition. I'm not here to do anything like that, but I am asking you to at least consider, is your faith grounded in the Father or is it grounded in that land? Because if it's grounded in that land, I think you're going to run into difficulties. But if we prove that the Jericho of today is a Roman misidentification, because it was identified about 325 AD by Helena, the mother of Constantine, if it was a Roman misidentification, whatever the reason, they needed a place to go for pilgrimages. So they said, yeah, this fort, that's going to be Jerusalem, and that ruin there, and that mountain's Sinai, and this is Golgotha, and all that kind of thing. You can go and look that up. But Helena is the one that did a lot of the naming, and then after her, they kept doing so. But if Jericho isn't the real Jericho, then what does that mean about the Sinai and the trek through the Sinai? Because it has its own issues too, right? When Moses said, you'll see the Egyptians no more, Egypt, as I said, was the superpower. And yet we hear nothing about them really for 1,000 years in the Bible. They're mentioned now and again, but only as far out possible alliances to protect the people, but not for trade, not for wars, as I said, all that kind of stuff. So how can two nations live 150 miles apart? And Egypt is recording things from nations that are 500 miles away. So how can they have no record of this kingdom that's supposed to be right on their doorstep? How can I help you to see this, again, this cognitive dissonance, right? Think of France and Germany. They've lived side by side. Let's say it's 150 miles apart. There's depends on which city you're looking at, or cities, but they're on a border. There's a border there. Think of 1,000 years of history of Germany and France. Think of just the last the world wars in Germany and France. But that was going on, you can go back to Napoleon, you can go back as far as you want, and there is what? War, trade, conflict, intermarriages, records, problems, difficulties for that because they were neighbors in Europe. But here we're supposed to believe that the Levant was this huge nation with a 1.5 million man army and huge palaces and kingdoms and gold and silver. And yet no letters, no marriages, no records, no trade, no nothing. There's no record of them in the Egyptian records. The Bible records we're not talking about now. We're talking about the Egyptian records, what they recorded. And it's like there's this phantom. I'm not going to. There's like this phantom of the opera, or this ghost that no one can see, or where's Waldo? Where we can't find. There's no record. There's nothing there. Nothing to sink your teeth. Nothing to even say that there really was even in Israel, other than a mention of a couple of things. That's it. Just silence. And if you think, where do these two lands stand? Does it make sense? Look at Germany and France and look at what they have recorded and done against each other for a long time, 1,000 years. You don't even have to look over 100 years to see the conflict and all the problems. So again, the scholars then conclude the Bible is myth. And as I said, but what about turn that around? What if it's the Bible that's accurate? And it is accurate, but the land is not. The land was given by Rome to us, just as they stripped the true people of the Bible from their own book. Did they not think about stripping the land too? I think they probably did, and gave a new land, a nice land, a Hollywood land, if you want to call it. They gave a land, and it suited some few things in the Bible, and they made it into a pilgrimage place. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with people doing a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. But in my opinion, if you think that Jesus walked there, or David was there, or Solomon, or Joshua, or anyone went through that whole area, I'm going, you can feel but I don't believe it's there at all. I believe it's pretty much in the opposite direction and not anywhere near that land. I want to discuss the Sinai, that one of the driest places on earth, literally one of the driest places on earth. Even for the few wells that they have, who guards them? Well, the tribes, the people that live around, the family that lives around, they depend on that water. It is guarded water. There aren't just springs you can just walk up to 1,300, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. No, these were the few springs that are even in the whole area were guarded, and they could never support the size of people that the Bible records going into the wilderness, because it is hyper arid, nearly waterless, only 200 miles across. We don't realize how small it is. 200 miles across for 40 years. Filled with Egyptian garrisons along the coastline, all the way down the Red Sea on both sides, there were Egyptian garrisons. Archaeologically empty. There is nothing in the center. There's nothing there. There's no record of people in any way that would match anything to do with the Bible. It is too small for 40 years of wandering around. And it's too small for even 10,000 people. Not a million, 10,000 people. And it's too small for the herds and flocks, because what do they need? Provender or grass, right? The animals need to eat and they need water. The humans need to eat and water, but they got manna from heaven, but they didn't get water from heaven. They only mentioned water a couple of times. So it's too small for 10,000 people, not a million to be walking around in this little area for 40 years. The Bible describes manna daily, water miracles only a couple of times, as I mentioned, herds and flocks surviving with the people, 1,000,000+ people wandering for 40 years, and no mention of constant water miracles. It's mentioned a couple of times, and that's it. So the water must have been fairly there all the time, access to it, because they had manna issues because the humans weren't able to cultivate food. But there must have been grasses, there must have been things for the animals to eat all along the way. And there must have been water for the animals and for the humans as well, almost all the time. I know we don't think of that so much, but what did the animals eat that were with Moses and the people? What did the flocks eat, as I said? What did the cattle eat? The goats and the sheep and all the different animals. What did they eat? Because the Sinai, I'll show pictures of it again, has no grass, no pastures, never has, no rivers, no lakes, no water, no food, nothing. It is one of the worst places on earth to ever be lost or to happen to go wandering through. It is dangerous, even to people in cars. If you break down or something, it's very dangerous. It's not a forgiving place. Archaeology, and they've done it in the Sinai, near Mount Sinai and all through the Sinai, it shows no migration, no bones, no camps, no pottery, no fire pits, no settlements, no evidence of 1,000,000 people, much less 100,000. Nothing. The Sinai cannot be the wilderness of Exodus. It just can't be. And of course, when you put that together with the issue of the walls in Jericho, you start to see we have a problem, Houston. This is what I've been told. This is what the facts are. They don't go together. So I have cognitive, this is hurting my head. I want to hide. I can't deal with it. Because what does that mean to my religion? What does it mean? In my opinion, it saves your religion. Because if the Bible is really from somewhere else, close by, let's say, but somewhere else, then the Bible can breathe. Then the Bible can be real rather than being a myth or a made up fantasy, as the scholars and archaeologists say, because they also see this same issue. They dig in the ground. They have the Bible text. It's not like they don't know about it, but they dig. They don't find this. So then they go, this is myth. They don't go, oh, the places we're digging is the wrong place. Let's go down there 500 or 1,000 miles away or 2,000 miles away and look there. They don't ever think about that. I want to talk about the Yam Suf. In Hebrew, the word Yam Suf is what is recorded for Red Sea, and it means sea of reeds. And reeds, like when Moses was in his basket, those reeds, papyrus, which means fresh water. I'll show you a map. There's only really two places where there's fresh water that could have been crossed. One is some lakes down near where on the way to Israel of today, and the other would be the Nile River. The issue with those little lakes is that they're little, right? And you can go around on either side, which means if they did a miracle and crossed the lake, then why do they need to take the chariots through the lake? They wouldn't have to. They could just drive around on both sides and they'd be able to catch the people, no problem. So the lakes have their big issues, but yet they do have the reed, so Yam Suf can work for that. But the other place where reeds grow is along the Nile. Actually, a lot of rivers all the way down into Africa have these reeds, the papyrus. And so that is what Yam Suf means, sea of reeds or water with reeds. But the sea, the Red Sea, does not have reeds. It is a salt body of water. So reeds, as I said, don't grow in salt water. They only grow in fresh water, right? So the Yam Suf, whatever it is, wherever you picture it to be in your mind, it was a freshwater body of water. Whether it was a lake or whether it was a river, it still was fresh water because reeds do not grow in the ocean, nor by the Red Sea of today. The Nile River, the why it was so fascinating to me is because once I started to think, okay, well, they didn't go in the Sinai. So where did they go? I mean, they're leaving, in my opinion, from the Middle Nile, from the Middle Egypt area, up around where the Valley of the Kings is, where the royalty lived in those days, because they were working on those kind of type of things, structures supposedly. So if they left from that area, so it's either go west or go east. Well, if you go east, you're hitting the Red Sea, and they didn't cross the Red Sea because they crossed the Yam Suf. And so the body of waters, you start thinking, okay, what about the Nile River, right? Because it is wide, huge actually, wide. It's deep, it's fast, it's dangerous, and you cannot cross it with 1,000,000 people. It's impossible to cross with the herds and the flocks, impossible to cross with carts and children, and it's impossible to cross with Pharaoh's army following you. The Nile is a barrier, always has been. It's a barrier. It's also the trap, because if you run up against it and you can't cross it, then it's a trap. The lakes that we talked about, those little lakes down there, and I'll show you that map again, you could go around those. They're not a trap. But the Nile River, if you run up against it, you got to do something because there's no other way than going through it. You can go up or down, but then you're still in Egypt. The only way to escape is to go across and out. So my opinion is that they crossed the Yam Suf, or the Nile River, stood up the waters of the Nile. They crossed, Pharaoh's army was destroyed, and they went off into Sub-Saharan Africa. And I'll get into that in a minute, because the Sahara of our day is not the Sahara of 3,500 years ago, when there were still lakes and rivers in the area. It was not populated much, but it was still in transition from when it was. There used to be Trill Black, another person that does videos. He did a very good video on this, where there's in caves in the Mali area, in that area in the northern Africa, they find pictures drawn on the walls of giraffe and other African animals. Well, now it's just a desert with nothing there. But at one point in time, it wasn't like that. So over time, things have changed to where we have the dry Sahara today. I call it, or others have called it, I like to call it, for myself anyway, I call it the green Sahara. That it was still green, there was still Lake Mali, there were still lakes and rivers. Even some old maps, I'll show a few, had rivers and maps. Even 500 to 1,000 years ago, there were still, the people that traveled there said that there was still water. And even today, there's still underground rivers in the area. But was the green Sahara the actual wilderness that Moses took the people into? Because 3,500 years ago, it was green and it was alive. Now, was it habitable for humans very easily? No, it was not. It was becoming a desert. It was a land of grasslands, rivers, lakes, wadis, wildlife, seasonal water, and ancient trade routes, and sparse populations. Everything that a journey for 40 years would need. Because remember, when they left the land, they weren't going into the Green Sahara. They were on their way down a trade route that leads all the way down, in my opinion, through to Sudan, which is where I see the start of running into the Canaanites and the South Sudan. But when they started this, that's when they sent the spies into the land, and they were fearful, except for Joshua and Caleb. So then Father sent them 40 years in the wilderness until all that generation died off. But the issue was they didn't go to wander 40 years immediately. They went to get into the land, and then they feared and they weren't ready, so they had to be prepared as a people. But the 40 years wasn't wandering around in a place with no water and no grass. There would have been bodies of animals strewn for miles. They wouldn't have made it in the Sinai of our day. But if they'd gone into the Sahara of their day, the Green Sahara, the animals could still have feed, which makes sense why that's not mentioned. They'd still have water, which makes sense. But there wasn't any food for the humans, so they had manna from heaven. And that makes sense, at least logically, whether you believe in miracles or not. At least that's logical. We don't see water being delivered daily to the people, just manna. And because of that, it can't be the Sinai, which would need water delivery daily, as well as the food. It's not fringe science about the Sahara, by the way. The Sahara, it is agreed upon, was a savanna, a grazing land, a land of herds, a land of water, movement, and isolation. It fits the biblical wilderness very, very well. And why it fits, in my opinion, just consider it. There was grass for the animals, because yes, they had animals. Most of the people in those days had animals to travel with, right? They didn't just walk everywhere either. Grass for the animals, and there was water for the people, occasionally miraculous, like I said, occasionally, but usually present. There was no nation to fight. They could go where they wanted to, really, and they didn't run into battles because they weren't taking anyone's actual agricultural land. They're wandering in this kind of isolation. It was perfect for 40 years of wandering, and they were traveling vast distances. If you look at North Africa and go from, let's say, as far as Niger or Mali and all the way through Sudan, we're talking huge areas. Yes, I believe that Put and the people of Put were further up in North Africa, but this area here, that you can see on the map, and I'll show it to you here again, this area was what would have been the Green Sahara. It was perfect for survival, not for living long term, but for survival. And the only way they survived was the manna from heaven and the quail that came in. That's really how they survived. So they didn't wander in just a 200-mile desert. They wandered across a continent, a huge area where they could wander according to the seasons and the water and being able to provide for their animals. Once they finished the 40 years, then they got to go south. One more, let's give it another try. Yes, you can try going into the land one more time. What was the land called? A land flowing with milk and honey. I'll put up some images again of the Jericho area, the Sinai, and olden pictures of Palestine. And you cannot say it was a land flowing with milk and honey. It had almost nothing. It was a desolate, dry land. And yet in the Bible, it's supposed to be this great land. When the spies came out of the land, they were carrying grapes and they reported on the greatness of the land, scared of the people, greatness of the land. So this land flowing with milk and honey, in my opinion, was in Africa. For me, I know many have different opinions, and I'm open, as I said, with all my videos. Everybody has their own opinions. Some think it's Ethiopia, some Namibia, some South Africa, some West Africa, some in Congo or the Democratic Party of Congo or Uganda. For me, the South Sudan, South Ethiopia, Kenya area, at least for me, it's the best fit that I can see so far. But I'm always open to new things too, because we haven't found Jerusalem yet. We haven't found the land yet. But we do see that land that is neither not hot nor cold, as Jubilee says about Shem's land, and it's 12 hours a day of light and 12 hours a day of night, and it is high enough elevation to be on the equator in the center of the earth, but yet it is a very temperate place, neither not hot nor cold. And so it is the perfect place for what? Cattle, goats, sheep, herds. Just look at the animals of Africa, even though we've done a good job killing off a lot. But still, just look at it. It is a place for large animals and for growing animals. It is a pastoral, heaven, I suppose. So milk means cattle, of course, right? Goat, sheep, herds. It means that kind of thing. And it means what? Can you imagine the Sinai and getting much milk out of your cattle in the Sinai? No, because they'd all be dead, right? But they have to have lush grazing land, which is what that area is. Abundant water, fertile valleys, large pastures, and space for millions of animals. Even if you move the wild animals out, there has to be space for the large amount of pastoral workings of the people of Shem and the others that lived in Africa. Milk is not symbolic. It's real milk. It means agriculture. Agriculture. It means agriculture. In the video I did of Aristeas in 250 BC going to Jerusalem, he said it was in the mountains all around, and he talked about the agriculture of the land. He talked about how many acres, I think it was 60 million acres, and how fertile the land. He talked about all that kind of stuff. Yes, because it had to be for this land to be there and be, as it says when we read of David and Solomon, it has to be able to support millions of people. It has to be this kind of land, a land flowing with milk and honey. But honey means what? Flowers, trees, vegetation, bees. If a bee was in the Sinai, it wouldn't even be able to escape alive. It's like, I'm sure there's a few little pockets here and there where there's water, where there can be a few bees. I don't doubt. But if you go into the pictures I put here, you're not going to find a lot of honey and bees because there is no flowers, vegetation, or trees or anything for bees to get what they need to make honey. So we need abundant vegetation, abundant flowers, abundant trees, abundant water, and abundant biodiversity for this land flowing with milk and honey. The scriptures talk about springs everywhere and water and rivers and lakes. And when we look at the Levant and, open our eyes, look at the land, a teeny lake that they call the Sea of Galilee now, that was named that. And there's a Dead Sea, yes. But there's dead seas all the way through Africa. There's salt seas everywhere down there in the Rift Valley area. And huge rivers. The River Jordan isn't hardly a stream when you're in Africa. It's just teeny. So honey is ecological. whereas the cattle show land that can support grazing herds. The honey shows something else as well that goes along with that, the ecology of the area. So if the Levant of today, with its irrigation, can sustain some things, the Levant of 100 years ago, or Palestine, is dry, it is rocky, it is narrow, it is seasonal, it is limited even in water, it is small, it's unable to support millions of people, it's unable to support vast herds. Just look at the movie Lawrence in Arabia and you'll see what I mean. Unable to support abundant bees. So a land flowing with milk and honey. So if you think of Mesopotamia, nice place, great rivers there, but I can't see that as a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a good land, a great land, but it doesn't, in my mind, go there. How about Arabia, any of Arabia? Are there a few areas that are quite nice? Yes. But most of the water for all the whole Arabian Peninsula has to come from desalinization because there's not enough water. So hardly enough water in the sands to have cattle and that type of thing. Is it in North Africa? Not likely, because again, when you look at North Africa, it was drying out. The Sahara was becoming from green and to drier and drier and forcing the people south. So you can't really look there and go, that's probably Jerusalem. So East Africa is fertile, one of the most fertile places in the world. It is, as I said, on the equator, which means it's the center of the earth, like Jubilees says. 12 hours of sun, 12 hours of darkness. It's right on the equator. It has being lush. It has the mountains. It's river rich. It's lake rich. It's animal rich. It's agriculturally rich. There's minerals all around. There's gold close by. There's salt seas. There's great rivers. There's room for everybody. There's room for the Philistines even. There's room for everybody. It's a huge land. I'll put up this, I always like putting up this image, but here's Africa, and it shows US within Africa, with China in the same image, with all of Europe in the same image, and you start to see just how large Africa is. So it could support these 40 different, 50 different nations or 30 different nations that are mentioned in the Bible easily, and the wars and the conflict. So East Africa is a land of cattle, the land of honey, the land of rivers, mountains, great biodiversity, and a land of abundance. Now whether it's in Sudan, Uganda, Democratic Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or Tanzania, or in Kenya, all that area, southern Ethiopia or whatever. I haven't figured any of that out yet. I've got some ideas, and others contribute so many good comments on these videos that it's wonderful. And please put out whatever your opinion, no matter, even if you think it's in South Africa. I love to hear the comments and I love to hear the rationale. But for all my South African viewers, I really do want to know, how do you get the people from Egypt to South Africa? I can see that maybe they came in Sudan, and you start to feel that they conquered that area down into Kenya and then conquered all the way down into South Africa. I mean, that's possible. We're talking thousands of miles. But how do you see that? I'd love to know if you're still watching by this time. But East Africa is the only land that fits the biblical description. And once you see it, in my opinion, you can't unsee it. So this is where I believe that Israelites, after 40 years, they conquered down and came into this land. Where exactly, I don't know. I've done a video on the Jordan River. You can take a look at that. I've done a video on where I think Jerusalem is, and you can take a look at that. But in my videos, I don't like to say this is hard and stone, that is this place. I can't even say I'm sure it's East Africa. It's just where I think. But everybody has their opinion, and we have to have proof, not just only what we think. But when we look at the Levant, the proof is there. It's in the ground. The Bible does not fit the narrative. Here's what we dig up. Here's what the Bible says. Throw out the Bible. Because you can't throw out the land. That would mean throwing out 3 major religions. And we can't do that. We can't do that. But in my opinion, for us as individuals, we can do that. Throw out the land. Boom, gone. Who cares about it? It's just as if I went to Orlando to Disneyland. I don't need to worry about it. Orlando's nice. The Disneyland's nice. I've been there, done that, but I don't need it. I need to find the real Bible lands the real Bible people that lived in those lands, which is why I just did this video on Shem. Because Shem, I don't believe, are in Mesopotamia in that area. Shem, to me, are Sub-Saharan Africa. From the Sahara down are the people of Shem mixed in with other groups like the Pygmies and the Khoisan and some of Ham, but that is the strength of where Shem would be in that area. This is, people say, when it comes to faith, that something broke my shelf or whatever. But what broke my Levant for me was the animals. Absolutely. I came at it from a different area, came at it looking at things that were occult and stuff, the sea, who runs our world and all that kind of stuff. But once I started to look at the land and the people, I started going, okay, what's going on here? And then I started to look at the animals, and it was like a light bulb goes on. It's like, oh, okay, we got problems here, because it cannot match the animals of the Bible. I'll put some images as I'm talking here. The animals of the Bible do not live in the Levant. Yes, there have been some, and some of them live there. But some of them also live in India. Some of them live in China. Some of them live in Canada. Some of them live in the US. Some in Brazil. Yes, some of the animals that are mentioned in the Bible live pretty much everywhere. You can find snakes. You can find scorpions. You can find lots of things, owls, pretty much everywhere. But when it comes to certain animals, ostrich, hyenas, jackals, you start narrowing it down. Some people say, oh, well, there's one jackal that lives in Levant. Fine. And they'll say, oh, there's lions that used to live there. They're extinct. Okay, fine. Right. But I look at the Levant, I'm going like, okay, if there were lions there, that was a long time ago, because there's nothing growing there, and lions need other animals to eat. But the point being is, I'm going to look for lions. I know there's some in a little bit towards India in that way. There's still a few there. But really, where do you think of when you think of lions? You think of Africa. When you think of mammoth beasts, well, there's in India, they do have elephants, absolutely, and they have tigers, but they don't have leopards there, and they don't have lions there that I don't think so anyway. So India has some of the animals of the Bible, absolutely. Probably a better match than almost anywhere else would be India, because they have the mammoth beasts, they have crocodiles, they have some things like that. But they don't have some of the other stuff that is needed. But when you look at Africa, it's like the only thing that is not there today is the bear. And there were bears in the Atlas Mountains in the center where the Sahara was. That area did have bears at one time. But that's the only animal on the list that you can't find in Africa. It's like, take a picture of any zoo or safari, and there you'll see the lions, the leopards, the apes, the crocodiles, the jackals, the elephants, the ivory, the gold, the wild asses, the wild oxes. Of course, they need grass. If you're going to be wild animals, they have to have those big animals. They have to have those things. The hyenas, the ostriches, the peacocks, the wild oxen, as I said. And so we have to ask yourself, where do all these things live together? If I asked a child and I gave them pictures of all these animals, I say, where do these animals live? The child would be able to go, yeah, right, they live there. You think they'd ever pick the Levant or Middle East for those animals? Not a chance. They might pick India because of elephants, and some kids might know that, but they would never, ever. I don't believe I could find 1 in 100 they would, if I showed them the animals of the Bible, they would go, yeah, it's in the Levant, or it's in the Sahara. They would never say it's in the Levant, or it's in Iraq or Iran. That's not where they would point for those animals. Okay, they just wouldn't. We would, because we'd have to say, I got to dig enough. I'll dig in the ground until I find a bone of a lion and a bone of a leopard, because I got to keep digging, because I got to find this, or else I'll be ruined, right? Or my belief system will be shaken. The animals, they opened my eyes to reality, to at least consider something. And once I started to look at that, it was just like peace, just opened up to all kinds. The amount of evidence that's in Africa and that compared to Levant just became, it wasn't even to be considered anymore for me. But as I said, I've gone through this process where I've claimed the Bible, and I've claimed it's in Africa, and there's room for all the peoples there, and I'm comfortable with that, which means I had to throw away what I had to believe all my life and toss it aside as something given to me by Rome and tradition and throw it away. And so the map is the issue. Is the map right or is the map wrong? Or will I bury my head? Because if the map is actually in Africa or the place is in Africa, then that's fine. Then the people are African. Fine. Which means that Jesus was African. Fine. I got no problem with all that. I just like the truth. The truth is what's important to me. I don't care about all the other stuff. It's just the truth. And that truth, as it says, will set us free. Free from what? Free from Babylon. The truth will set us free from Babylon, from error. And if we believe in a land, the Levant, that is actually the Holy Land, and it's not, we are believing in falsehood. No matter how good our hearts are, we're still believing in falsehood. And it leads to this terrible problem that we have, especially in our day. In the last 10 years, I see this with friends and with family. No, the Bible is myth. Moses is a myth. Just look online, look on YouTube. Moses is a myth. They're all myths. Everything's a myth, right? Isaiah's 3 people or 10 people, but Jesus never existed, and that didn't happen. And it's just because as they start, all these problems build up about where the Bible was placed. It can't over the cards start to fall. But instead of, as I said, saying, well, what about the Bible being over here in Africa and instead of the Levant? Oh no, they can't do that. So then it's toss the Bible out. And that breaks my heart, which is the reason I do some of my videos, because these lies are destroying people, right? The whole world, as it says in Revelations, the whole world is deceived. I believe it. I was, certainly still am in many ways. If the whole world is believing that this place, the Levant, is the Holy Land, and it's not, well, would that not mean that the whole world is deceived, even just in that one huge thing? Of course it is. So all we have to do, and all we can do, is make a choice. Not a choice to believe what I have to say, not a choice. The journey in life, I believe, is individual. And I see people in all my comment section that are all believing different things, but coming to, it doesn't matter. The truth is the truth, but the truth is divided in thousands of little truths. And so if you're working on one little truth and you're ahead of me in that, and I'm working on another little truth and I'm ahead of you in that, then that's just fine. All we're aiming at is to find the pearl of great price, which means we have to be able to give up everything. And that means everything to me. I had to give up everything. My belief in the Levant, of course, my belief everything, pretty much all of history, all of science. Once you start taking it apart, you start to realize, oh my gosh, Babylon is huge, this world that we live in. Yes, you can go out and smell the flowers. Yes, you can go out and there's real mountains to climb. But as soon as you start dealing with money and power and politics and people, it's just straight into the God of this world's camp. And he runs it very well. Very well. And yet, even in Jesus' day, the people in Nazareth wanted to throw him off a cliff because he caused cognitive dissonance. They couldn't hold these two things at the same time, so let's get rid of him. And the Pharisees, it's a human condition, basically. But if we want to enter in at the straight gate, Jesus said we have to become as a little child. If you can go back, take that little child thing and go back and read the Beatitudes. The first one is poor in spirit. And you have to even see the kingdom of God. You've got to go through that. I had to go through the poor in spirit, where I'm going, oh my gosh, everything I thought I knew. I thought I was righteous. I thought I was living the commandments. And then I realized I wasn't living the first commandment, second commandment, third commandment, fourth commandment. I had to find the true Sabbath day. It was like, oh my gosh. But if we aren't willing to go as a little child, take our ego, throw it out the door, and become as a little child and be poor in spirit to start to see, then we can start to see the distance between us and the truth and the Father. And then we can go, like Moses, the meekest man. He wanted to know. He was willing to give up everything. And he did. But he was able to find. And he brought the people to the mount so he could do the same thing. Hey, I'm sure he was excited. Hey, guys, you can come and I'm going to introduce you I'm going to introduce you to God face to face, just like I talked to him face to face. You can come and talk with him just like I did. Hey, come on. And the people are like, they're like, no, 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 run, hide. No, Moses, you go up there. So he goes up, and what do? They build a golden calf. They go back to the religions of the world, all the religions that make their calves. That's what they wanted. And when Moses comes down, he goes, oh my God. They couldn't go there. They couldn't go to that first step of poor in spirit. Instead, they made a golden calf and stuck to what they knew. And that is the challenge of this discourse for you and for me. Can we start to see the things in our life that are true, like the Bible, and the things that are false, like the Levant and Jerusalem and Jericho and all that, and go, I want to know the truth no matter what, and I will hold on to the Bible because I trust that more than I trust man. Do I think it's perfect? No, but I trust it. I can see the words of life in there, and then move forward. And then from forgive comes forget. Then there's the mourning for our sins. Then there's the meekness, and then there's seeking after righteousness and pure in heart and all that. That's the way of the disciple. But we can't skip the first step, in my opinion, which is to go as a little child and say, yes, Father, I know nothing about anything. Just all the things I thought about the Bible, they're all wrong. Christianity, all wrong. Religion, all wrong. I'm going to throw it all away, and I'm going to start as a little child. Can you help me to see the way? And that's what the church originally, after Jesus in his time, was called, the way. It wasn't a church like with buildings and all that kind of stuff. Jesus did not start that. He started a way to take us to the Father, which is the first commandment, the way. So we can find the way. And Jesus asked us all to come find the way. Like he asked the rich young man, sell everything you have, go get rid of all that garbage out of your life, and come follow me the way. The rich young man believed in Jesus. He did works. He kept the commandments. And yet he was cast off because he wouldn't go and become as a little child and cast it all away and start new with with the Savior. I know for us, we'd all go like, no, I'd do it. I wouldn't do it. I would go with them. But really, would we? Because if we're struggling with this issue about Jerusalem and everything else, well, then it's very difficult. It isn't easy. But as Jesus said, the burden is light. Once you start to look and start to find truth, it becomes lighter and lighter. I'm going to put a video here that I think you might like. And over here, I'm going to put a video of Jerusalem and where it might be. I think if it goes along very well with this, and you might enjoy that. Anyway, take care. Have yourselves a good day. And please, please leave a comment. I love to hear from all of you. I need your information and to make my videos. It really helps on everything in Africa or wherever. And also, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the video getting to be seen by more people. Thanks for you all, and take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.